Welcome back to my YouTube channel. On my 34th birthday, the room smelled like jasmine candles and expensive catering, but all I felt was the sharp chill of betrayal. I stood frozen as cranberry juice dripped down my $3,000 silk dress, deep red stains spreading across the cream fabric like a wound. My niece lowered the empty glass with a smirk, her voice dripping more venom than the juice. "Now you look as cheap as you really are." My mom actually clapped. My sister crossed her arms, chin lifted in pride like her daughter had just won an award in cruelty. And everyone else? They watched. Some amused, some curious, no one brave. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just felt the cold stickiness slide down my wrist. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. Not a crack, not a crumble, but a click. A lock turning, because none of them knew. This night was already the turning point. They still saw me as the version of myself I used to be. The girl who apologized for existing, who paid for peace with silence, who funded their emergencies and forgave their insults because family is family. They never updated their opinion of me. Even while cashing checks I wrote, I excused myself without a word. I walked past the guests, past the fake smiles, past the eyes waiting for me to crumble. I stepped into the bathroom, locked the door, and looked at myself in the mirror. Juice on my dress, mascara still intact, shoulders still lifted. I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman who built an entire business from scratch while they whispered I'd fail. I saw the girl who used to beg for approval and realized she didn't need any of theirs to breathe anymore. And that's when I wiped the dress with a towel, straightened my spine, and walked back out. The music stopped when I picked up the mic. I smiled at my niece first, then my mother, then my sister. My entire life, all I ever did was try to earn love from people determined to withhold it. But after tonight, hear me clearly. Your opinions are no longer my currency. My sister scoffed. My niece rolled her eyes. My mom started to speak, but I held up a finger, just one, and she went silent. You mocked me in the dress I bought with money you borrowed from me. You clapped when your granddaughter tried to humiliate me in the home I paid to remodel. And tonight, I'm done sponsoring my own disrespect. I turned to the guests. Some stared at the floor, others shifted uncomfortably. The catering? Paid by me. This venue? Booked by me. The car half of you came in? Loaned by me. And starting tomorrow, every credit line I opened in my name for this family is closing. Permanently. My niece's smirk vanished. My mom's hands froze. My sister's face dropped, realizing what that actually meant. I set the mic down, picked up my purse, and walked out, cranberry stains and all. Outside, the night air hit my skin like freedom. That was the last day I begged for a seat at a table I built, and the first day I built one of my own, with velvet chairs, locked doors, and invitations only for those who clap for my healing, not my humiliation. On my 34th birthday, the evening was staged to look perfect, like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Soft lighting bounced off crystal glasses, the scent of jasmine candles wrapped the room, and every woman there wore the kind of smile that hides gossip behind lip gloss. I had spent weeks planning this night not because I needed validation, but because I wanted, for once, to celebrate myself without apologizing for it. My dress was custom. Champagne silk, hand-stitched, fitted to my body like it had been made from my shadow. It cost more than what most of my relatives made in 2 months, and I had hesitated before buying it. Not because I couldn't afford it, because I knew they'd say I was showing off. But this time, I didn't dim myself to fit their comfort. I was standing near the dessert table, laughing politely with one of my cousins when I heard the wet splash before I felt it. A burst of cold slapped against my ribs and stomach, followed by the slow, sticky crawl of cranberry juice soaking into the silk. Gasps fluttered across the room like birds scattering from a gunshot. I didn't move. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and my throat as the red stain spread like a bruise across the fabric. My niece stood inches from me, still holding the nearly empty glass. She didn't even bother pretending it was an accident. Her lips curled with the kind of satisfaction you only see on people who enjoy cruelty. "Now you look as cheap as you really are," she said, loud enough for half the room to hear. Her tone wasn't playful or embarrassed. It was deliberate, sharp, meant to slice. What stunned me wasn't her words. It was the reaction around her. My mother actually started clapping, 3 short, approving claps like she'd just witnessed a performance she endorsed. My sister didn't flinch, didn't reprimand her daughter, didn't check on me. She just watched, chin up, pride simmering in her eyes like this was some kind of victory for their side. I could feel dozens of eyes on me. Some people hid their smirks behind champagne flutes. Others pretended to look away but didn't. No one stepped forward. No one said her name. No one asked if I was all right. The music kept playing, but the room went silent inside of me. It was the kind of quiet where your heartbeat sounds like a drum against your ribs. I didn't lash out. I didn't scream or cry or demand an apology. I just stood there, cranberry juice dripping from my dress onto the marble floor, and let the moment settle into my skin. And beneath the shock, beneath the humiliation, I felt something unexpected, a calm so sharp it could cut glass. Because even though they thought they were breaking me, something far bigger was already shifting. As I stood there, the chill of the juice seeping into my skin, it wasn't just about the stain or the insult, it was every moment that led up to it. This wasn't new. It was just louder, more public, harder for them to pretend it wasn't intentional. I thought back to growing up in that same family where my existence was treated like an inconvenience they had to tolerate. I was the child who got hand-me-down opinions before I got hand-me-down clothes. If something broke, it was my fault. If someone was upset, I was the problem. If money was tight, I was expected to fix it, even before I had any to offer. When I started working at 19 to help with bills, they called it finally being useful. When I got a scholarship, they said it was luck, not effort. When I landed my first decent job, they joked that I'd probably get fired in a month. I remembered the way my sister would roll her eyes whenever I talked about my plans. Like ambition was a disease she hoped I wouldn't spread. I remembered my mom saying, "Don't get ahead of yourself," every time I aimed at something higher than survival. They were comfortable with me small. They preferred me apologetic, quiet, tired, and available. Even after I built my business, even after I paid off debts that weren't mine, even after I helped fund my niece's tuition when her father backed out, they still saw me the way they built me in their minds. The backup plan. The emotional punching bag. The one who never says no. They loved to remind me of who I used to be while pretending not to see who I'd become. And I let them. For a long time, I thought that being good to them would make them good to me. I kept showing up at family dinners where they mocked the life I was building. I kept answering phone calls that started with fake sweetness and ended with money requests. I kept lowering my voice so theirs could stay loud, but nights like this don't appear out of nowhere. They're built brick by brick with every disrespect you swallow to keep the peace. The juice on my dress was just the spillover of years of entitlement they believed they were owed. They didn't fear crossing a line because I had never drawn one. And in that moment, watching my niece smirk while my mother clapped like she was cheering on tradition, I realized something crystal clear. They weren't suddenly cruel. They were consistently comfortable, and I had outgrown the role they kept trying to stuff me back into. I didn't rush to the bathroom. I didn't grab a napkin. I didn't even look down at the stains spreading across my dress. My silence made them uneasy, and that was the first shift in power I felt all night. My niece expected a reaction, anger, tears, maybe even yelling. She wanted a scene she could laugh about later. My mother wanted confirmation that I was still the same girl they could publicly embarrass without consequence. My sister wanted proof that money hadn't made me soft, but still made me less, but I refused to give them the performance they were hoping for. I took a breath so slow it felt like the room inhaled with me. My heartbeat steadied and the noise around me dulled into something distant. I didn't see juice. I didn't see fabric. I saw clarity, a kind of unshakable stillness that comes only when you've finally had enough without having to announce it. Their laughter faded when I met their eyes, one by one. I didn't glare. I didn't scowl. I just didn't flinch, and nothing unsettles a bully more than the absence of the reaction they were banking on. I heard someone near the bar whisper, "Is she okay?" Not out of concern, but confusion. They'd all seen me swallow smaller humiliations before, pretend not to notice, laugh it off, make excuses for the people who hurt me. This time there was no pretending, and even without a word, they could feel the difference. I didn't move until I was ready. And when I finally did, I didn't scurry. I walked, calm, shoulders relaxed, head upright, as if the stains were an accessory I'd chosen on purpose. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd been handing out for years. I passed relatives who looked everywhere but directly at me. I passed a cousin who half raised her hand to help, then let it drop when she saw my expression. I passed my aunt who always told me, "That family only respects power. They don't respect kindness." And for the first time, I understood exactly what she meant. When I reached the mirror in the hallway, I paused, not to assess the damage, but to witness the woman standing in front of it. Cranberry streaks down silk, yes, but posture unbroken. Lipstick untouched. Eyes steady. I didn't look ruined. I looked awake, and that calm wasn't weakness. It was control, the kind that doesn't come from pretending everything is fine, but from knowing you no longer have anything to prove to people invested in your humiliation. In that quiet, I knew. This wasn't the moment they destroyed me. It was the moment they revealed themselves, and finally, I was paying attention. When I walked back into the room, the energy had shifted, but not in the way they expected. They thought I'd return flustered, maybe with a sweater over the stain or tears in my eyes. Some probably hoped I'd leave quietly, giving them the satisfaction of calling me dramatic or overly sensitive later. Instead, I walked in without wiping a single drop from my dress. Conversations paused mid-sentence. A few guests tried to pretend nothing had happened, but they kept stealing glances at me like I'd come back holding a lit match to a room full of gasoline. My niece was leaning against a chair, scrolling her phone like she was bored of the scene she created. My mother stood near the cake table, pretending to rearrange utensils, but I could see the smugness still sitting comfortably in the crook of her mouth. My sister was exactly where she'd been before, arms crossed, chin lifted, watching me the way someone watches a movie they think they've already seen. I didn't head toward any of them. I went straight to the microphone at the front of the room. A few people assumed I was going to thank everyone for coming or make some emotional announcement. Even then, they still thought my purpose was to entertain them. The DJ hesitated, hand hovering over the volume controls. When I picked up the mic, the music didn't just fade, it died. I let the silence breathe for a moment, long enough for discomfort to crawl up a few spines. I saw my sister's eyebrow twitch, the first crack in her composure. My niece looked up from her phone, surprised that I wasn't hiding in a bathroom. My mother gave a tight-lipped smile like she was still confident this was going to end in my humiliation. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't tap the mic. I didn't force a shaky laugh. I just spoke, steady, unhurried, as if the cranberry stain on my dress were nothing more than a shadow. My entire life, I said, I have been the easiest target in this family. Some people blinked. Some straightened. Some froze. I was the one expected to sacrifice, to stay quiet, to pay the bills nobody else wanted to admit existed. I was the apology everyone demanded and the punching bag no one acknowledged. I saw a cousin shift uncomfortably. An aunt's eyes darted to my mother. A family friend suddenly found the floor fascinating. I turned my head just enough to meet my niece's eyes. She tried to smirk again, but her lips didn't quite cooperate. And the funniest part, I continued, is that the louder I succeeded, the harder some of you worked to convince yourselves I hadn't changed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't speed up. I didn't pause for effect. The control in my tone was louder than any shout could have been. I glanced at my mother, not to seek approval, but to let her see the difference in my gaze. Tonight wasn't an accident, I said. It was a reminder, not of who I am, but of who you still think I am. That was the moment a murmur rippled through the crowd, not loud, but undeniable. A few people finally understood they weren't witnessing a meltdown. They were witnessing a reckoning, and for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of their expectations slide off me like that juice had never touched my skin. I let the silence stretch after my last sentence, not to be dramatic, but because I wanted every person in that room to feel the weight of it. Some shifted in their seats. Some held their breath. Others stared at the floor like they'd suddenly discovered guilt between the tiles. My mother opened her mouth as if to interrupt, to salvage control the way she always did. But before she could even draw breath to speak, I lifted one finger, calm, effortless, unbothered, and she stopped. Her silence wasn't respect. It was shock. I turned slightly, resting the microphone against my fingertips as casually as if I were holding a glass of water. "You've all gotten used to believing that I'll stay no matter how you treat me," I said, voice even. You've mistaken my kindness for weakness, my support for obligation, and my silence for agreement. I saw cracks forming in their faces, the beginnings of panic in the people who had always assumed I was too conditioned to ever push back. I didn't raise my tone, but my words hit with more force than shouting ever could. The catering tonight? I paid for it. The venue? Under my name. The car some of you arrived in? On my insurance. The last 3 bailouts, the college tuition I covered, the rent I fixed when you forgot to pay. Every one of those receipts has my name on it. Eyes widened in pockets around the room. I watched the exact moment some of them remembered just how entangled their lives were with my generosity. And starting tomorrow, every line of credit I opened for this family will be closed. Every account, card, and automatic payment that has my name attached to it will be canceled. If you've built your comfort on my silence, start building a backup plan. My niece's face dropped first. My sister's expression twisted like she'd swallowed something metallic. My mother's hands, resting so smugly moments earlier, gripped the edge of the tablecloth. I placed the mic back on its stand, not with anger, but with finality. No theatrics, no tears. Just the clean, undeniable sound of someone who had nothing left to prove. I picked up my purse from the chair where I'd placed it earlier. The cranberry stain on my dress had begun to dry, turning darker, but it didn't bother me. I didn't hide it. I didn't apologize for it. It wasn't a mark of shame anymore. It was evidence of their last attempt to define me. As I walked toward the exit, not a single person dared to block my path. No one called after me. No one laughed. Even the ones who used to join in the mockery kept their eyes lowered, suddenly unsure of the script. The door opened with a soft push, and for the first time in a long time, I felt air that wasn't borrowed, wasn't filtered through the expectations of people who only clapped when I was beneath them. I didn't look back, not because I was running, but because there was nothing behind me worth returning to. By the time I reached the parking lot, the night sky felt different. The air didn't cling to me the way that house always had. My heels clicked against the pavement like punctuation marks on a sentence I'd taken years to finish. I sat in my car for a moment, not to recover, but to recognize myself. Not the version they kept trying to shrink, but the woman who finally stepped out of their frame. I glanced at the stain on my dress one more time and felt nothing but clarity. That cranberry spill wasn't a humiliation. It was a timestamp. The moment they crossed the line for the last time. The night their access to me expired, they thought they ruined my birthday. What they really did was throw me the kind of party people remember for the wrong reasons, and I walked out remembering for the right one. In the days that followed, the calls came, first angry, then frantic, then quiet. I didn't block anyone. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just enforced the boundary I should have drawn years ago. Their shock wasn't because they didn't know what they'd done. It was because they never thought I'd stop letting them do it. And here's the secret no one tells you. The day you stop begging to be chosen is the day you start choosing yourself, and everything changes. I didn't lose a family that night. I simply stopped renting myself to people who treated me like a convenience. The stain washed out of the dress the next morning. But the version of me who tolerated their disrespect. She didn't survive the night, and I don't mourn her. I thank her for holding the line long enough for me to finally step over it.